All right. Hi, guys. Welcome. Good Friday evening to you for those who are watching in the US, and for those who are here in Asia, very good Saturday morning to you. As you can see, we're trying a different format here. No fancy banners and starting music. Trying a different platform called StreamYard today, so that we can interact more closely with you. We can pull up your comments on screen. So, today I'm having a very, very special guest, and I really love these shows, so it's definitely a lot less playing, but, a lot more wonderful conversations and stories. So, so glad to have my next guest today, Mr. Andy Snitzer. Andy is such a wonderful player, and, he has such a distinguished career. I first heard of him when I saw him playing jazz, with the Manhattan Jazz Orchestra. I think if I remember that name correctly. So we'll definitely talk about that, But man, the number of people he has toured and recorded with along the years, ranges from, rock, R&B, pop, and even movies and recording dates. So we're definitely going to talk about all of that. And, Andy is someone that still keeps his signature sound, no matter what genre and style he's playing. So, so excited to have him here all the way from New York. And, it's probably late, in New York now, but we thank Andy for being here with us. So before I bring Andy on, I'm just gonna jump into the comments a bit and say hi to you guys, both on YouTube and Facebook, so wherever you're watching from, hope you're enjoying. Don't forget to share the video as well. And yeah, for those of you who are on YouTube, you can subscribe if you haven't. So I'm just gonna say hi. Let me scroll through. And yeah, and Xavier from the US was here even before the stream started. So nice to see you. Miss Lou is watching. Auntie Jasmine, nice to see you. And we have Macron, nice to see you. I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly. Lucien from Brazil. And Russell, good morning. Nice to see you. Russell also has his own shows, and he had the amazing Greg Filling Gaines as his first special guest. So, and I know Russell uses StreamYard also, so that's awesome. Hi, Jiawei, nice to see you. And let me see who else. Oh, Yongxian, nice to see you. Yeah, he's a customer of our shop. Wendy, good morning. And James, nice to see you from the US. And Adrian is here. Let me just see how I can zoom into these comments. Let me see. This is great. Okay, Adrian already has a first question, so which I will hold until we get Andy on, and then we can definitely um share that question. We have Andy's nephew here. That's amazing. Snitz Music on YouTube. Thank you so much. Kathy from New Jersey, nice to see you. And yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna jump in this show. I'm so excited. I always say that I'm so blessed I get to interact and chat with my saxophone heroes, and deciding to broadcast this live, just helps to share this moment with more people, so that you guys can also ask your questions and also learn a lot from the stories and conversations. And of course, Andy has a saxophone ready as well, so anytime he'll be able to play for us. So so I'm gonna just wait for a minute more. People are still coming in. Adil, nice to see you. Thank you. You say nice shirt. Thank you so much. And Roxy is a great saxophonist from Philippines. So she's here as well from Manila. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. And Vincent, good morning. Oh, and Jeff Kashiwa is here as well.
Awesome.
He he has a very interesting question which
Oh
I'll bring
boy.
up later. Actually, Jeff is asking, dude, who cuts your hair? Looks very professional. I would think he's talking to Andy. So Andy will get to that story. If people have been following your social media, they will know. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for joining. Oh, and guess what? And Jeff is gonna be a special guest on my show in the second week of July as well. So I'm so excited. Man, I'm just really blessed to be able to, you know, um yeah, just interact and chat with all my favorite saxophonists. And for some of you, maybe you're not familiar with their music, and hopefully after today you'll check out their music as well. So because we have a mix of people who are saxophonists, but also just general music lovers. So I'm glad to be able to just introduce them, and bring our worlds closer. In we're 12 hours apart now from here to Andy in New York, and probably a 24-hour flight to get there, but with technology, it's just been so amazing. And I always say, maybe on a normal day, when Andy is busy touring, this interview might never happen, so that's the silver lining, from all the madness that's happening. And yeah, I'm just so blessed that people like Andy and my previous special guests have, just been so gracious with their time. So, man, I'm really looking forward. Um, Roxy says she was going to ask Andy about his Frozen repertoire. Yes, I saw that on social media. We can definitely talk about that. And Xavier is here as well. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna bring on Andy, and we're gonna start this conversation. So all right, Andy, Mr. Andy Snitzer over
Hey,
here in New York. Hey, hope everyone can hear us clearly, and hope the video looks good as well. So, Andy, how have you been over there in New York these past few months?
we're doing okay. We're headed in the right direction, and I think next week I'm going to be able to go into a restaurant and sit very far away from other people and actually have a meal. So it was certainly tough for a minute here, but hopefully we're going to keep going in the right direction. So.
Yeah, it was getting very worrying even for myself, because I have some friends in New York as well, and to hear that it had one of the highest rates of infection, which was really crazy. Was it just a crazy period of panic where you were when that happened?
Yeah, I think people did panic because it all happened very quickly, right? Seemingly.
Yeah.
But everybody, well, mostly people stayed inside, and the numbers are better. So I'm not a medical expert or anything, but it seems like we're doing better. The atmosphere seems better, so that's all great.
Are businesses reopened already or only next week?
Some businesses are reopened. It's kind of a tiered approach, and
Okay.
the more essential things, as determined by someone, are opening first, and on. Probably, as we were discussing in the preamble, the concertizing, that kind of thing, is going to be near the end of things coming back. So,
Yeah.
but I, my little silver lining is that, as you know, I play with Chris Bodie quite a bit recently, and on March 13th, when they basically froze the music business, 40 or 50 gigs just went away like that, right? And so I've used the time to basically finish an album, and had it not been for those cancellations, I would be very, very far from finished as a result of all that touring. But I made a great deal of progress, and I'm excited about that. So.
All right. Thank you, Andy, for sharing that. Andy, can we check? It's funny. Some of the people have commented that there is reverb on your voice now. It's so weird because I don't hear it, but
ask people if they hear a single delay.
Yeah, is it a delay, guys? Do you hear? Because Andy and I were having this problem.
I hear the same
earlier.
thing.
Yeah.
Are people hearing a single echo?
Yeah, Roxy says yes.
Right.
But I'm not sure if Roxy is saying yes to the reverb or the or the delay. Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, one single delay. That's so weird that everyone hears it but me.
You're lucky.
Yeah, it's weird. So hopefully it's manageable. Never had this issue before. Um. Okay. Let's see. Hmm. It's bouncing back, but why do I not hear it? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Let's carry on. And I tried
Okay.
not disabling the sound suppression, so I don't think it will help. But as
Well,
of
let
now,
me.
you know,
I can tell you. Let's see over here. I don't hear an echo anymore.
now no more.
I don't hear a delay. So let's
Okay,
see
cool.
what does
So
everyone
guys,
else
let us
say.
know if you, yeah, if you still hear that delay. Maybe it's that, I clicked on, what was that button I clicked? So just now I clicked to disable the audio processing.
Okay.
So I clicked that just now. Now I disabled that. So I guess I'm enabling the audio processing. So
I
it's
see.
all good now. Wow. So
Great.
that was causing a problem, which is
You saved the day,
interesting. Yeah.
Daniel. You saved the day.
We will sort
Fantastic.
it out after this. And for those of you who are watching, I'm not sure if you see that my video feed is different as well. My trusty black camera, a black magic camera 6K has just suddenly gone crazy. The it became super orange even though we didn't touch anything, but we'll figure that out. So I'm actually using a webcam now. So this is the Logitech Brio 4K, which I think looks not bad as well. Of course, not as good as the Black Magic, but so the morning started very, very, very weirdly. Just nothing seems to be working, but I'm sure it'll only get better from here. And I'm glad we sorted the delay. Thank you so much. Charlie is saying Andy's level could be higher. Let's see if Andy, are you able to bring up your mic
Sure.
just a bit more?
Absolutely. Just give me 1 second. How's that? Is that better? One, two,
Yeah,
one,
to me,
two.
I think it sounds better. All right, guys,
Okay.
let us know if that sounds better. And yeah, I love it because we're one big family. So sometimes when we first started the show, we had some latency issues, and people will be kind enough to tell us, hey, slightly, it's like 1 second off and all. Okay,
Right.
Charlie says it's better. Great.
Great. Great
That's
news. Okay.
awesome. All right. So yeah, just jumping into where we left off. I think the first thing I could jump in with is with Chris Botti, to
Yeah.
talk about that. Was that gonna be your plans for the was it gonna be the rest of the year? All
Oh
those
yeah.
shows.
So basically, Paul Simon retired,
Oh,
more
he
more or
did.
less in where are we? 2018. Um,
Wow.
and I've known Chris forever, and he knew that Paul was retiring and that I would be free. So he said, the way we started it was, he said, come do a few shows here and there. We'll see how it goes, see if we like it, and that more, eventually ended up with me being on the gig. So it's a
Wow.
pretty busy gig. He's probably got on 130 dates a year. So
Wow.
up until this thing happened, I've been traveling a lot, and as I said, traveling a lot and getting very little done on my album. So, yeah,
Yeah,
but
but I
but
guess yeah.
so yeah, he's I've known him forever. He's great. The band is great. It's a great opportunity. It's a great gig to have. So,
Mm,
assumedly, when everything gets back to normal, I'll be out doing that again. And
mm,
yeah, there you have it. So I seem to fall into. I mean, this is literally how I think about it. I seem to fall into very good road gigs. That's literally been the story of my life, and um, it's it's not as simple as just pure luck, but there's definitely, if you see the world this way, the universe is takes care of me in that way somehow. Like I've
yeah.
since 1994, I've gone from the Rolling Stones to Paul Simon to Chris Bodie continuously, right? With no break, no down period, no you know, time period without a gig of that stature. So I'm
Wow.
grateful. I'm grateful for that, and I don't exactly know how it all happens, but that seems to be a thing that happens. So
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So for people who don't know, Andy was Paul Simon's saxophonist for probably more than 15 years, Andy. Do you
20,
remember? 20. Wow.
20, yeah,
That's amazing. And then
crazy.
before that with the Rolling Stones. Maybe Andy, if you could bring us back, how long were you with the Rolling Stones for?
So I was there for 5 years, and believe it or not, that it was by my own choice. So apparently, I'm the only sideman in the history of the Rolling Stones to quit the gig.
Wow.
Well, and I basically, it was fantastic. Uh, but if you're familiar with Bobby Keys, this is kind of a legendary rock and roll
Mm,
saxophonist
yeah.
that became famous by his association with the Rolling Stones. He was there at the time, so I was playing in the section. I wasn't playing any solos. I was in
Mm,
my early 30s, and on a gig like that, like the parts were it's basically like whole notes and very basic horn part figures.
mm,
And after 5 years, I said to myself, well, if you're going to keep doing this, it's basically you're just doing it. You're just taking the money. You're just staying here for the money, which was fantastic. And I don't mean to uh, diminish that aspect of things, but I
sure.
felt as someone still kind of early in their life and career that I had other goals, right? Like I wanted to accomplish more than that. So this is what I mean about the universe. I left the Rolling Stones in October of 98, and I started with Paul Simon in May of 99.
Wow.
So basically almost like that thing that people talk about where you close the door,
Yeah.
right? And the other one opens. And if you don't close the door, the other one doesn't open somehow. Like if you think about those kind of things existentially in that way. So that's what happened. I When I left the Rolling Stones, I was not leaving it into another gig. I didn't have a thing lined up. I just left. And
Wow.
very shortly there was the next thing, which I'm taking Michael Brecker's chair, right? And
Yes.
and I am the soloist, and it's providing more of the opportunity that I would hope for myself. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And I can only imagine the struggle. And I think this doesn't relate just to music. I think in any job, any industry, I think you've shared, touch on a very important point. Are we just doing it for the money? Are there, more things that we want to achieve and work towards? And it must have been tough. I mean, like you said, who
Absolutely.
leaves the Rolling Stones?
Absolutely, and a lot of people thought I was out of my mind, right? Because to getting the gig in the first place was also had many layers of good fortune to it, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
we were young, and many people go their entire careers without having a road gig of that stature, right, or
yeah,
economic benefit. So
yeah.
I get it in these random kind of ways. I'm young, and then I'm gonna leave it, and people, musicians in New York thought I was out of my mind, and by some measure maybe I was, but but there was something telling me like you didn't practice for 10,000 hours to just play whole notes for the rest of your career and kind of deny all this ambition that you have as a soloist, right? And
Mm,
that was the motivator. And also it was like I'm sure you'll relate to this. Sometimes when like your being just makes the decision, right? Like I didn't um, agonize over it, right, for weeks and months on end. It just I just one day that was it. I knew that was it.
wow.
This is what's going to happen, and I knew that somehow this was what had to happen.
Mm, wow. Could I ask if did that happen like immediately, or was it, let's say, at the 2 or 3 year mark, you already had thoughts about it? How did this thought process play out?
I think so. In October of '98, I was getting off of a 16-month tour, right? I was finishing a 16-month tour, and I guess now we're driving down on the details. So I was finishing a 16-month tour. This was maybe like early November, right? And then the word came, um, we're going to be off until the New Year's, and then we're going right back out for another 6 months, right?
Oh,
So somehow it was at that moment that I knew, right? Like I just done 16 months of this. I'm going to be home for 6 weeks, and now they're saying we're going to do 6 more months, and somehow I knew it that at that moment that was the moment, right? That I had to uh, move. And again, it depends how trippy you want to get with this stuff, right? Had I done those 6 months, I would have been unavailable when Paul Simon needed to find a new saxophone player because Mike Brecker was quitting, right? I would have been on the road with the Rolling Stones. So to be available for that, I would have had to leave the Rolling Stones in the middle of a tour. Much less politically pleasant, right?
yeah.
Much messier. So I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, for
is
sure.
that all somehow?
For sure.
I don't
I
know,
think,
but
and that I think is a common theme across all the guests that I've spoken to, and just amazing the way things work out.
yes.
Even though it might seem crazy, everyone around you will probably tell you you're crazy, but you're right. And I was already gonna ask you that if you stayed on the Rolling Stone, that the Paul Simon gig would probably not have happened.
Well, so it would have been one of two things, right? Like they know that I'm out, so I don't even get asked, right?
Yeah,
Or Mike still asks me because, or has, says to Paul, this is the guy, and then they ask me, right? And then I have to do an unbelievably unprofessional thing to the biggest band in the world, right?
yeah,
So that would have been bad. That would have been much worse than leaving as I did when I did, right? Um, so it's yeah, I find it very interesting in retrospect how it all worked out. But it highlights another thing, which is you really have no choice but uh, to follow your own muse, so to speak, to follow your own. Uh, uh, it's not even thoughts. It's to follow what the essence of you is telling you. You have no choice but to follow it. Really, I think, even if it seems crazy.
yeah. And I hope people listening really take that to heart. Because I just had a conversation yesterday with my student, and he's a working professional, and he just tendered his resignation.
Right.
And his boss was telling him, "You're crazy. Who resigns in a pandemic?"
Right.
you know and guess what? He was, and I think he might be watching right now, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, because
I
I
don't.
think it's valuable. And he took a pay cut to join a different firm, which was way closer to what he's always wanted to do. And I thought that was really inspiring.
I think
you
it
know
sounds perfect. Sounds perfect.
yeah. So I really respect people who choose to follow their heart in that sense, when you know what's right, even in this period,
Right.
where it's so uncertain, and he chose to do that. And I thought it was really, yeah, inspiring. And I guess similar to what you're saying, I guess you knew what was right, and
Yeah.
just staying any longer just.
It's almost like there's no choice, right? Like it has been decided, and you must follow it. It felt like that, right? Like
Yeah.
this this has been done, right? This is done. I'm not going back.
Mm.
So
Wow. That was, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And,
sure.
and that links very nicely onto the Paul Simon gig, and I think, you mentioned in brief, but some people may not know the answer. But how did you get the Paul Simon gig?
So basically, it was two things. So Chris Bodie, right? Like I said, it's been my friend forever. He had played trumpet on the tour prior, right? Now that tour prior was back in 1991, right?
Hmm.
And this was 1999 that we're talking about. when I joined Paul Simon.
Hmm.
So it was twofold. It was Chris and it was Mike. I think probably, I don't know any of this for sure, but I think probably it went down like Chris saying, "Hey, what about Andy?" and Mike saying, "Oh, something like, yeah, that's a good call. He's the right kind of guy."
Mm.
And so the good fortune of it was the weight of Chris and Mike Brecker saying to
Mm,
Paul,
mm, mm.
"This is the guy." I just there was no audition. There was no hey, let's check him out. It was yeah, it was just mine, right? And
Wow.
and I went. Now, I certainly could have lost it if I fell on my face, right? But that's the other thing about it. When you have those moments, you better hit the pitch, right? You better be ready to swing the bat and hit the pitch. And and I did, and everything was fine, and that began the 20 years with Paul Simon. So
Wow. That's really amazing. And I heard, and I think it was Jody who told me that you and Michael Brecker went to the same high school.
right, so I'm from the same little suburb of Philadelphia as the Brecker brothers, and
Wow.
this is another thing which it's a joke I make, but there's another little part of me that like maybe this is an actual thing. Like I feel like there was some kind of like saxophone, big bang, right? Or like a saxophone meteorite dropped into the earth or something in that part of Pennsylvania. And much closer to when Mike was a kid, right? And he got 95% of whatever that magic was, and I got maybe or 98%, and I got the last 2% or something like that. But yeah, he's 14 years older than me, um, but went to the same high school. He and Randy both went to the same little high school outside of Philadelphia. So um, and that was deep because I became like aware of him, right, in my middle teens, like 15 or 16.
Mm,
And then I
mm,
remember my mother saying she figured out, that I was interested in this guy, like heavily interested in this saxophone player, and she somehow put it together. I mean, literally, I think she saw the name and said to herself, "Oh, I know Emily Brecker. She's married to a lawyer that my husband knows, and they live around the corner, or something like that. I wonder if she's related to this guy that Andy's obsessed with, right?" So it turns out that Emily Brecker's Mike Brecker's sister.
wow.
Complete freak out, right? So I my mom set it up that I went and talked to Emily Brecker. Like, what did Mike do? Mike practiced in the bathroom. Into the bathroom I went, right? That's that's the only place I practiced after that. I don't do that anymore, but for a period of time, right? Whatever the close acoustics, right?
Yeah.
The short reverberation, but um, yeah. So we're from the same little part of the earth, and he is the most direct and powerful inspiration for me, and that's I'm obviously saying something that thousands and thousands of saxophone players say, but
Yeah.
that's the little uh, oddity or quirk in my circumstances that we're he he grew up. I mean, literally like 3 blocks from where I grew up. He was gone,
Wow.
when I lived there, but that's how close it was. So
Wow. And how did your friendship and when do you first meet Michael, and how did that friendship start
so
over the
I
years?
mean, basically, uh, when I got to New York, which is right after college, so I'm 21, and that would have put Mike at 35, maybe. Um, and I'd go out and see him at McKell's or something like that, and kind of try to introduce myself and say, "Hey, I'm that kid, or I'm that guy that's I'm also from Cheltenham." And uh, initially there was some little recognition, like he had heard the story, right? Um, but it that really wasn't anything. That really had nothing to do with where it happened. It basically happened after I had achieved some success and some word of mouth goodness in the
Mm,
New York scene,
mm,
and then I think like that plus the fact that I was from Cheltenham, kind of started to put it all together. And he became friends with Chris, who I was very good friends with when they were on tour. So
Mm.
it kind of all blossomed, I'd say,
Mm.
in around late 20s or 30, something like that. And and then we were friendly for the rest of his life. So, and which was, you know, it's the guy was an absolute uh, hero, icon, force of nature, etc. And uh, you know, I'm blessed to have spent time with him and played with him and been in his basement and listened to him play and try mouthpieces and things like that. And
Wow.
it's as shocking as you would think it is. So it's as devastating as you would think it would be. So
Man, that must have been some great times over
oh
there.
oh just well I mean everyone's got their thing, right? But
Mm.
for me that guy is like he's like he's a perfect storm basically of saxophone playing and improvising musicianship. Like every single quality that you'd want to have was in him at the absolute highest of levels. And I don't think you'll see something like that for a long time. Just my personal opinion, of course. But
Yeah.
so feeling that way and being able to have a relationship with him was it's nuts. I still kind of like, really, did that happen? So
Oh, that's really amazing. And it ties in very nicely with a question we have from YouTube from Adrian. And Adrian, I'm going to be sharing your second question first before I put your first question on. So, your question here is, Andy, do you still play on Michael Brecker's tenor, the one in your possession?
so I play it. I don't take it out uh, much, right? I have it here, and but I don't want to carry it around into the world, right? So I've got the Trevor James horn, which I love, and I have another Mark Six, and those are the two horns that I'm going to actually take out into the world and expose to danger. But I take Mike's tenor out. I apologize to it, and then I have a go at it now and then. But uh, yeah, it's really cool to own it. It's not it's so he had three Mark Sixes. Like I saw all the horns that he had. He had three Mark Sixes. He had a balanced, and then he had kind of an odd lot of stuff like an Ishimori. Not that there's anything wrong with Ishimori. I'm not calling it odd, but yeah, Nishimori had a brand new Selmer, which I think they gave to him, and he probably never played.
Mm.
Uh, he had a Yamaha. He had a bunch of different things, but he had
Mm.
three sixes, and they were all spectacular. The one that he really played his whole life is at William Patterson in New Jersey as part of that exhibit. Uh,
Mm.
I have one, and Tim Reese has one. So that's what happened to those Mark Sixes.
Wow. And
But
how did that happen? If I'm not wrong, his wife, did she call you to
well,
check
so
out the
we're
horns?
we were friendly, and we became stayed friendly and became friendlier after Mike passed. And I think at some point she said, "Would you like to own one of Mike's saxophones? Because I'd like to, I'd like that. I would like that if you would want to do that." And I said, "Yes, I would want to do that." And so literally, I went to I think she didn't have the horns in her place. She had all the horns in the basement of a relative's house, which was a big enough house with a big enough basement to hold all
Mm.
this stuff, right?
Mm.
And I went with her to this gentleman's residence and just played all the saxophones. I played the balance. I played everything that was there, and I took that six, picked that six. So um, anyway, yeah. So I certainly do play it, but like I think of it more as a historical piece, right? And I don't want to take it out into the world. So
Mm.
I mean, the great likelihood is that nothing would happen to it because generally bad things rarely happen to your horns, right? But I don't I don't want to do that. So and also
Mm.
I guess if I'm being honest, like it'd be a little uptight to play his tenor all the time. I would be a little freaked out to play his. I mean, I'm joking, but I would actually feel like this poor horn, you know. like what it was used to, right? And now it's kind of like, I mean, I'm not, you know what I'm saying, I'm being self-effacing to a certain extent, but it's used to Mike Brecker, and now I'm playing it, so that's by definition it's a downgrade, right? Uh, anyway,
Yeah.
so for all those reasons, Adrian, it's here in the house, and I take it out once in a while and have a go at it, basically. So
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not wrong, you sold after you got that, you sold one of your Mark Sixes to Andy Brush in the
yes,
UK as well,
yes.
right?
So I had a silver six, which I played for a long time, and and I can't really remember what the so like basically I guess it's this, right? Like I'm a person that was less fussy, and I'm not fussy now really, but I was even less fussy about horns when I was younger. I had that silver six. I really loved it, and I think at some point I kind of decided that maybe this isn't as great a horn as I think it is, or as great a six as I think it is. And
Mm.
Andy, who's a friend and a fan, he wanted to have it, kind of for like maybe similar reasons. I'm not making this
Mm.
equivalency directly, but similar reasons to the reason I wanted to have Mike's horn. So um, anyway, so that's what happened to that silver
Yeah.
six. Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. For all the saxophone geeks out there, was the horn that you have of Michael's, is that like a 5 digit, a
Yeah,
later sound?
it's in I forget the exact number, but it's in like the high 60s, something like that.
Okay.
So it's a really early six, like a Joe Henderson six, and
Mm,
and it's a great horn. It feels like a little bit more muscular in the hands, right? Like
mm,
it's a little bit less of a Porsche, like some of them can be. Like it's a little bit less of a sports car, but
mm,
um, has an amazing sound, and
mm,
the history of it. So I guess
mm,
the one that I own, apparently, I've been told by Bob Malik and other people that are Mike's like chronological
mm.
contemporaries and knew him when he was very young.
Yeah.
This six is apparently the one that he played when he was younger, before the neck injury, before all of that, and then
Mm,
I think after that neck injury, this horn was kind of too big, right, of a bore and a weight
mm,
somehow, right? So
mm. That's really
anyway,
interesting.
that's pretty geeky, but
Yeah. So we won't stay too geeky for too long. But I know Adrian asked another question earlier. I'm gonna bring it up now, and he says, "Andy, you always have a very unique sound on tenor. It's very Sanborn drenched,
yes,
always raw and gutsy. Was Sanborn one of your main influences?"
completely. So you'll see, as I mentioned to you, I have an alto tonight because
Yeah.
I've been playing alto lately on this album, but I was an alto player first, so I didn't really get uh, I didn't really play tenor at all until maybe the end of college, right? And it didn't somehow become the primary horn until into my professional career, late 20s, something like that. But I was a Sanborn guy completely. So that all of that went into the tenor and informed the way I play tenor, and um, you know, kind of gave me a thing on tenor that's maybe more unique than a thing that I can have on alto, given my influences, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And were there any other major influences for you growing up?
Yeah, totally. Cannonball was huge. Train was huge. Stanley Turrentine was huge. Um, that's those are the big ones, and I mean lots of other influences too. But I quite obviously reacted to guys that had excuse me, a lot of saxophone prowess, um, uh, facility with harmony, technique, but but plenty of rock and blues. So that's another part of the conversation is like I never shied away from being interested in pop music. Like hearing David Sanborn on David Bowie's Young Americans was probably the thing that made me go, wow, because I was a clarinet player from the time I was 8. Hearing that when I was 14, I think made me say, I want to do that. I want to play that. I want to play a wind instrument, but I want to play it in that kind of music. And what that guy is doing on that David Bowie song is unbelievable. And who's he? I want to be like that, right? So it was Sanborn first, and then Sanborn led to Brecker, obviously, because they worked together a lot. So you'd see their names on records together in the horn section, and that's how that all laid out. And Train, of course, is such a giant, and the I would argue it's a similar story, right? Not pop music, but there's a lot of blues, there's a lot of soul, there's a lot of time feeling Train, even with all that intellect, right? And it's the simultaneous expression of all those things that makes him so powerful, not just the intellect. That's my argument. All the intellect, of course, is enormous, right, and important, but it's not only that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's just so wonderful that I guess everyone has their own unique voice. And and just now I was sharing with you before the show that in all the various settings that I've heard you play in, your sound still stays so strongly. I don't think you're ever trying to sound like one particular hero. And it's so hard. I would say a number of people who have really distinct sounds. I mean, probably 10 million people or 100 million people play the alto saxophone. And even on alto you sound like yourself.
I sound like
And
me, right?
yeah, it's just so amazing. And it's difficult, because I guess for me, growing up, and I think I talked about this with another one of my guests. I always have the habit of, if I'm playing Girl from Ipanema, and if I, the Stan Getz version is what I was transcribing and learning, naturally I feel like
Right.
gravitating too much to it.
Right.
So that's a struggle sometimes, because I have all these references floating in my head, but then I always forget to just be me,
So
and not. Yeah.
yeah, it's an extremely important conversation. Having all those references is essential, right? Like you
Yeah.
must have them. But uh, I get into conversations about this when I talk about transcribing. So I've transcribed, but I never wrote a single thing down. I did it by ear, and for whatever reason, maybe that was laziness, or maybe I knew something that I think I know now, which is you don't want to get too involved in another person's exact vocabulary, because you have to have your own. You have to have your own. You can be a Stan Getz devotee, but at the end of the day, he's already been here, right?
Mm.
There's already been a Stan Getz. So um, that's and you definitely hear a ton of that in people that have studied Sanborn or Brecker, right? So I feel like it's important to just play a lot, right, by yourself. Not certainly listen and certainly transcribe, but also just play and try to in a natural kind of way, right? Like an unprescribed way, a non-prescribed way. Uh, Find pieces of vocabulary that are yours, right?
Yeah.
Find approaches to harmony that are yours. Find melodic ideas that could be yours somehow. Not again, not like today I'm going to find my own vocabulary, but you know what I mean? Like don't be so involved in the study of your heroes that you lose the pathway for yourself to emerge. So
Mm.
yes, you must be involved in the study of your heroes if you want to be serious about this, right? And if you want to develop a sound and a stature that's going to stand up to what's come before you. But
Mm.
but you like I'll always think of myself, and this is an interesting conversation. Like I'll always think of myself as being inferior to Dave Sanborn and Mike Brecker, right? I can't possibly think about it any other way. But I know absolutely that it's pointless to try to sound exactly like them. They are the original item. You cannot equal, right? You cannot surpass or even equal what they've done as themselves. So you must find your own shade, right? Your own, um, in some way or another, your own take on it, whatever that means. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that I've apparently I've been successful to some degree. If you always know that it's me, so
Yeah, for sure. And and somehow it makes me feel a bit better as well because I also have never written down a single transcription.
good.
But I just spend a lot of time playing along. And actually my mindset is always like I imagine myself being in the studio with those musicians, So if what would I do if I'm standing beside Stan Getz? How
Right.
does he make me, feel when he plays? And then I just go along that vein. And then I can put on the David Sanborn, record and play along. And then there's a totally different vein. And
Right.
somehow I guess, there were times where I always feel like, am I doing something wrong? Because I feel like I benefit so much more doing that rather than taking out my manuscript paper and spending 3 hours on 8 bars of transcription,
Right.
and I'm sure there's merit to that. I'm not taking that away. It's just never been me.
Definitely.
I just never
Well,
grew up.
yeah, I think everyone has to kind of like you've got to figure out your own way of the things that make sense to you. So, in my case, I did transcribe, but it was always by ear, right? I never put it on the paper. The idea was I'm gonna eventually learn this whole solo, but I'm gonna do it by ear and I'm gonna do it by
Mm,
memory, right? I'm never gonna look at it or think about what it is or try to, you know, take these ideas and learn them in all 12 keys and stick them into my playing. I'm not going to do that, right? Like you, and that's the interesting thing. Like as much time as I've spent on Mike Brecker, I've never done that, right? Like said, well, what the, did he do there? And grab it and figure it out and say, okay, I'm going to put this into my playing in all 12 keys. I've never done that. And I think that's a good idea to not do that. So,
mm,
um, but anyway, really, the greater truth is whatever occurs to you, whatever is pulling on you, if transcription is really like drawing you and feels right and feels powerful to you to do it, writing it down, you should do that.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
My opinion. It's just my opinion. It's just what worked for me. Right? That's
mm,
that's all. So
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And just looking at some of the comments, I'm going to pull up something interesting here from Roxy in the Philippines, and I'm going to bring it up on screen. She's asking actually a bit more about the technical side of the saxophone. How does the TJ ergonomics work with you, Andy? She said she's only tried the TJ horns at my shop here in Singapore. So, how do
so
you find the keyword?
okay. So here's the full disclosure on that. Right? Like I basically said to those guys, I'm a Mark 6 guy, and the reason I'm a Mark 6 guy is that like it's a sports car, right? Things snap back quickly. The springs they're light and they're fast, and I feel like that however fast it is that I can go, right? And I like to do that. Um, the Mark 6 is not getting in my way. So let's work on this horn that I've selected, and let's try to make it. Uh, let's try to put it, you know, uh, into that world as close as we can. So
Mhm.
I, you know, there were on the horn I have there was work done on the palm keys, right? Like it's not the same as it was off of the rack, right? And now, having said that, I think that's part of the thing you have to do in any case, in any with any horn, probably, right? Like you're probably not going to pick something up and go like, wow, you know, I wouldn't change a thing about any of this. Key heights, positions of keys, this is perfect. That doesn't really happen. So the answer to Roxy's question is, um, it's great, right? After this investment of time and observation on my part with them. So, uh, I couldn't comment on like the complete line of horns and the differences in key layouts and things like that. but I can say that I love what I have, and it took a little bit of tweaking, but that's normal business, I think. So
Hmm. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I think Trevor James has been, really popular in recent years, and especially here in Asia. They
yeah,
literally fly off the shelves. And I guess, in great part, because people can see, yourself, Jeff Kashiwa,
right.
Steve Cole, who was just on the show last week. And actually, I just remembered Steve told me that he really decided to give it a try because you highly recommended it. Do
Yeah,
you remember
I had that. I've had that conversation with Kim Waters and Steve and Jeff, who are all friends, and I think I was the beginning of that bloodline for the TJ horns. But
that?
basically, I mean, I have that relationship because it was my estimation that they're trying, right? Like they're actually doing the work that everyone says that they're doing, right? Like meaning they're they're getting the horns and they're working on them and they're improving them and they're tweaking them and they're
Yeah.
taking feedback and they're actually putting in dollars and hours to make things better. And that's the kind of company that I would want to be associated with.
Mm,
So,
mm,
uh, and I think when Steve, I think it's Steve and Cam are definitely playing the horns. But anyway, when I recommended when I recommended Trevor James horns to those guys, it was possible for me to do that with full faith and credit. So,
mm,
and that, as I'm saying, that's because of the business approach that they take.
mm. Yeah, that's really, really cool. And we have Tony Lakatos joining us from Facebook. Nice to see you, Tony. Thank you for popping by. And yeah, we have Xavier here. He says, "Thanks, Daniel, for another great show. I'm very proud of this fellow University of Miami grad." So along with Ed Cal, Bobby Martinez, and Greg Diaz. He says, "By the way, I was in Gables with Rick Magitsa and Ed Cal." So
Oh,
cool.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are both two great saxophone players that I went to college with. So
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, I want to pivot here and talk a bit about your time with the Rolling Stones.
yeah,
Sorry, your time with Paul Simon.
yeah.
You know, and I wanted to ask, when you approach those solos, I can imagine night after night. Did you actively try to change them up? How was your approach playing in a like a pop rock
Okay.
setting?
So here's my philosophy, right? And I think everyone has a different take on this, but my philosophy on the 8 bar solo basically is that um, it's not really an improvising moment, right? It's an 8 bar um, uh, it's 8 bars away from the lead vocal, right? In which you have the opportunity to make a memorable, powerful melodic statement, right? And so my approach is to craft it, right? And then basically approach it like a classical music performance, right? So person's playing a concerto, right? They're playing a clarinet concerto. They're a concert artist. They're playing the same concerto all over the world. They don't change it, you know. They don't tweak it and change notes and things like that. It's a clarinet concerto, right? So what they're after is what's the single best performance of this piece that I can do, right? Was it this city? Was it that city? Was it the other city? And that's my approach to the pop saxophone solo. Is I'm attempting to play that really a composed statement, right, with as much uh, vibe and muscle and power and soul as I can, and that becomes the challenge, right? Like not how can I make this different every night, but in what city did I really achieve? And I would actually like go back on YouTube and find the solo for Still Crazy After All These Years in different cities, and like bookmark ones that I occasionally really liked. So I have a small save set of performances of that solo where I feel like that one that was actually badass, right? And in other
Wow.
cases, I might feel like, well, the bend on the high C was a little, it wasn't awesome or whatever. The reed that night didn't have like complete thunder, right, in terms of its power. Um, so anyway, that's a long answer, but that's basically the idea, right? It's a composed statement, and I know there are people that would take issue with that, right? But I feel very strongly that solo on "Still Crazy After All These Years," for instance, is iconic, right? If you're on Billy Joel's gig and he calls "Just the Way You Are you changing Phil Woods' solo? Really? Like it's iconic. It's perfect, right? You have to play it and make it your own, right? In terms of how you're approaching it, you have to. But um, that's that's a compositional element. So anyway,
Yeah. No, but thank you for sharing that. And I would think that actually what you have to do, it's probably even harder than if you had, free reign to just create something, you know, on the fly. Do you feel that way? Like, a lot more that you have to think of and consider actually when you only have 8 bars.
well, yeah. I mean, I feel like the thing about like going on the fly in those kind of moments is that the odds of you coming up with something, designing something, right, on the spot that are better than the constructed solo from the record, which has become iconic, right? Like, so we could argue about there may be instances where you show me an 8 bar saxophone solo in the pop literature, and I'm like, that's not really very iconic, you know? So I am going to try to do better than that, or I'm going to write my own version, something like that. But if you're playing
Mm,
something where like it's pretty well established that the thing is iconic, the
mm,
odds of you improving on that are slim, right? So
mm,
I would, I would find that intimidating in that way. The the playing the same solo every night, the challenge is like your musical and emotional and physical commitment to doing that same thing, right? Night after night after night.
mm,
But
mm,
there's all sorts of examples in creativity, generally, of things like this. It's like the person that's performing in a Broadway show, for instance, right?
yeah.
They're doing the same thing 8 times a week, so they have to summon that commitment, right? And
Mm,
like have that audience believe that it's the first and only and most important time they've ever done that in their lives, and
mm,
that's kind of the challenge. For instance, in playing the Mike Brecker solo on "Still Crazy After All
mm,
These Years," and uh, one more little thing about your question. So quite naturally, and I think this is just something that I do. Like I turned it into my own thing, right? Not in terms of the notes and the rhythms and the melodies, right? It basically stayed what it was, but uh, it became infused with my Sanborn tenor thing. It became like more rocked out than Mike's version, and in
mm,
fact, the whole song like during that section turned into like a more rocked out thing than it had been um, in the '80s when Mike was playing it. Uh,
mm,
so if you hear them back to back, you'll go, oh yeah, it's quite obviously different, right? That's quite obviously Andy's version, but
mm,
but the the melodic and the melodic construction of the solo is the same. So
mm.
essentially,
That's
but
Yeah, and I think Kathy Kathy shared a comment and she says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is
fair
very
enough.
true,
Yes.
and then yeah, just add, your vibe to it. And I think, man, that's something that we all can learn from. And I guess, jumping into what uh Roxy is asking, she says, what advice can you give to soloing saxophones who find it difficult to listen back to themselves?
So
Sometimes it's hard to turn off the critic when she hears back her own playing.
Roxy, I feel you, and this is what's the right phrase? This is the great, the great difficult, not difficulty. This is the great truth of what we do, right? The critic is the critic is important. The critic is essential. If you really want to master your craft, right, and develop your art and strive to be as close to your heroes as you can be, the critic is always going to be around. Hopefully, right? And this is how I kind of describe it. You don't want the critic inside you to be so unrelenting, right? So overwhelming, so unwilling to find moments that you can like, that it crushes you, right? Like the critic is necessary and important. Like I just described to you, kind of like. So I'll give Roxy this example. In looking over all those times that I played the Still Crazy solo on YouTube, right? Most of the time, the critic is in the mix, right? And I don't bookmark it, but there are a few, and I can still return to them on this day and hear them, and I still think that one was badass. Like that night, the critic has nothing to say. So you got to find those moments for yourself. But
Mm.
in actuality, critiquing yourself and being critical of your own playing, and then uh, the resulting motivation in you to do better, right? To prove the critic wrong, right? Uh, those are the things that make you better. So
Mm.
I would never turn that off in myself, because then basically, I mean, look, it's like this. I distinctly remember being like 15, right? And playing along with the Young Americans, right? David Bowie on my alto sax, 16 maybe, and thinking to myself, yeah, I kind of got this, man. I sound just like that guy, right? I think I got this. Without the critic, you stay there, right? You stay that 16-year-old kid who isn't even far enough to know how the light years that he still is from Dave Sanborn's performance, right? Without the self critique, you don't jump up, right? It's really step, like you're playing, and then at some point something happens, and you go boom, you go up a level,
Mm.
right? And then you're here. Those steps don't happen if you're not busting your own ass, basically. So hope that helped.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
Roxy, thank you for all your questions, which is so great that we can share this to the other people who are watching as well. Maybe Andy, if I could jump in and ask, do you do the same, critiquing and listening back for your jazz solos?
Well, I mean, I sure would, right? You brought up the Manhattan Jazz Quintet, which is a whole other interesting story. But for instance, in that environment, I didn't have the opportunity, right? Because it's not my record. I'm not producing. Um, but and really the way those records were done, there was very little preamble. There was very little rehearsal, right? It was really old school. Like you show up and throw some charts on the stand and off we go. And
Mm.
sure, when I listen back to those records, there's a lot of critic clicking around in my mind, Roxy, trust me. But um, you don't necessarily have the opportunity. So now, having said that, if I was making my own jazz record, yeah, the critic I'd still be that person. It has a different aperture, right? Like if you're playing straight ahead, like um, the standards are different, right? And like moments of sloppiness or like mishaps or that kind of thing. Uh, they're more likely to possibly be acceptable as vibe, right? Or style or randomness. And whereas in a pop solo world, they would just be a mistake, right? So I think you have to position your self critique uh,
Mm.
appropriately, accordingly. Um,
Mm. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. And we have another question. And a comment from Xavier actually. He says he hears so much of Stanley Tarantino, Joe Farrell, Michael Brecker, and Bob Berg in your playing,
cool
which
with that.
is
Cool with that.
that's Xavier,
Xavier.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's that's for sure. All those giants, and I'm sure you've listened a lot to them,
Yes.
as well. And yeah, and Xavier has another question. He says, and this will lead nicely to talking about your new album later. He
Yeah.
says his favorite album was The Traveler, and
It's
he
my best album.
especially loves the
Yeah.
song Marseille.
Yeah.
Was there any specific inspiration for this album?
So basically, as the title suggests, like that album was basically composed and started in hotel rooms, right, around the world on tour. And the songs that have titles, in most cases, were conceived in those places, right? Now, I I'm not going to go as far as to say that, like, okay, I was in Marseille and I looked around and something happened to me and then I wrote that song. It could have just been that I happened to be in Marseille when I wrote that song, but um, the that's the inspiration for the story of that album, is that it was done around the world in these different places as a touring musician. And so, to Xavier's point, like, uh, I don't think I'll ever do better than that album. And I don't mean on an individual song basis or performance basis, but I mean randomly, right? On that album, somehow I put 10 songs together and they sound like a work. They sound like one work. And I feel like, to the point of self-critique, like, at this point, it's beautiful. I kicked my ass as always making that album, but now I can put on that album and listen to it from beginning to end, right? And I'm like, man, this is great. You
Mm.
you did this, man. You should be like, if you achieve this once in your life, in your career, like an album that actually sounds like an album. It sounds like a it's one work of art, right? And you can listen to the whole thing from beginning to end, and you don't have to skip a song, right, or skip a part because it's making you self-conscious or making you uncomfortable. You actually
Mm.
like all of it. That's unbelievable. So
Wow.
I we have the same taste, my friend, and um, another an interesting thing about Marseille that Xavier might like, this story. So Chuck Loeb sent me like a whole tune, right? Because we were writing together at the time, and uh, the tune was based on that first guitar lick in Marseille, that loop, right? But then it went a lot of different places, right? A lot of different harmonic places. It was much jazzier and more complicated, and and I just took that loop, the one, the 1 to 4 minor harmonic loop, and wrote a whole new song over that loop. Uh, for whatever reason, I made that decision, and then that song turned out to be Marseille, which was a very successful song on that album, and like your like Xavier, a lot of people particularly like that song. So
Wow, that's
yeah,
awesome. So for those of you who haven't checked it out, do look out for Andy's music. And if you guys want signed CDs, Andy, can they contact you directly on your
sure.
website?
You can hit me
Mm.
on Facebook. At this point, my website, I go up there, once it's kind of a dinosaur. I don't pay attend to it all that much, but Facebook, obviously, it's easy to write me a message.
Mm.
Anybody can do it. So absolutely,
That's awesome.
love to hear from your I was going to say listeners, but your attendees.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Xavier, if you like that album, hit Andy up for a signed copy.
Sure.
That would be really cool. And Charlie has a comment. He's asking, "Is it easy these days to find a good read consistently?"
All right. Some of my friends here, Charlie Drayton's a very good friend of mine, um, and Charlie Drayton is a very, very famous drummer, actually, and well-known musician. But he's either joking, he's either messing with me, or Charlie Drayton is perennially aspiring baritone saxophone player. So we're still working on that project, but we haven't completed it yet. But to answer your question, sure, it's hard. You know this. I mean, reads are a struggle, and that's just the way it is. It's not going to ever be different. You know, I'm fortunate to have a relationship with Diodario, right? So I can kind of, like, if I pull a read out and it's an absolute turkey, it's easy to throw it in the trash, right? Um, when I was a student, I would work a lot harder to get something out of a read before throwing that money away, basically,
Mm,
right? But
mm,
um, when you find one that's when you find the one that's resonating in the ways that you like, right? Like in all the both sides and all the aspects of the reed, you play it till it drops. I don't, if I find a reed like that, like it stays on the mouthpiece. I never let it dry out. Like it's going to stay wet until I'm done with it, basically. And I'll play it. I'll play that reed as I'm describing. Like sometimes there'll be like a little hole in the tip, right? Like I'll take a little piece out of the tip. If it still plays, I still play it, right? I don't care what it looks like. There's holes in it, whatever. If it's doing that thing, it's going to stay. So, but yeah, Charlie, it's very, when you pick up that baritone sax, eventually you're going to see it's hard to find a good reed. So,
So funny. Thank you for that. And oh, we have Michael Linton saying hi from
hey,
Facebook.
Michael,
Hi,
what's
Michael.
up, brother? How are you, man?
Thank you for dropping by. And we have Jeff Kashiwa
Jeff.
leaving a nice note. He's saying another great interview, Daniel. Is very simple. Andy's playing passion and dedication inspires me to reach further into myself and to see what's there. Love you both for sharing your gifts. Wow,
Jeff,
thank you so
Jeff,
much, Jeff.
thank you,
And
Jeff is a beautiful guy. That, just as an aside, there's so many great people in the saxophone community, right? Like, I love Jeff, I love Steve Cole, I love Kim Waters. Like, I'm friends with these people, Everett, Kirk, Gerald Albright. When I see them, Dave, it's beautiful because I see those people and I'm genuinely happy on a personal level, right? Forget the saxophone point of view, but from a personal, like, human being to human being level, I'm always happy to see these folks. So it's a beautiful thing. But thank you, Jeff, and I'll see you soon, I'm sure. So
yeah, it's so amazing, after speaking to many of you and just seeing how much mutual respect there is for
yes,
for each other, because it could have not been this way. It
yeah,
could have been,
yeah, and
very different dynamics, but
for whatever reason, you don't really find that. You don't really
yeah.
find that. Like Michael Lincoln. I think I saw Michael in Portugal, and I see him, and I'm like, oh, like, give each other a hug, and there's just nothing but kind of like, mutual respect,
Mm,
as you said, and admiration for the time that uh, each one of us, these other folks, have put into uh, achieving a high level on the same instrument that you've done. It's like we're kind of brothers in arms. We've all fought the same fight in a way, and spent
mm,
those thousands of hours in a practice room, right, to actualize our devotion for this instrument and for the music and for our heroes, right? So
mm,
it's a great thing. It's a beautiful
mm.
thing. But
That's really amazing. And I just wanted to share with those people who are watching as well. Next week, we're also gonna have a very exciting week. We're gonna have both Dave Koz and Tom Politzer on the same week. Two
great.
different shows. Dave coming in on Wednesday night. And then Tom will be on Saturday night, US time. So really, really exciting times. I'm just so, and Andy, I'll say this again, I just really so appreciate the time, that you guys are willing to share with so many people, and especially over on this side of the world. I
Sure.
think the last time I saw you was at NAM, you
Yeah.
know, at a
Exactly.
NAM show, and that's with me traveling more than 20 hours. And
Unbelievable.
it's so crazy. So what are the odds, And I just think it's so gracious for you guys to wanna, be here and share your stories and conversations. And sometimes they may not be the easiest questions, but we're so glad
I,
that
you
you
know,
guys.
I'm. I mean, if people are interested, I love doing it. It's it's our chance to share, and if folks
Mm,
are interested, it's my pleasure to do it. So, and a silver lining, right? Like, we've got the time right now, so it's great that
mm.
everyone's coming forward and accepting your invitation and doing this great series. So,
Yeah, it's been so amazing. And the good thing is this will live on YouTube, so we never know, some of these stories, might be inspiring someone who's watching 10, 20 years from now,
right,
so I
right.
think, that's why I really wanted to put this out on as a live stream, instead of just a private chat, so but we really really appreciate that. And I'm gonna jump back in. um Oh, Xavier is really kind. Daniel and Andy, two outstanding musicians and gentlemen of the highest degree. Thank you so much for the discussion of true music and life. Really, really appreciate that.
Beautiful.
To be honest, I somehow over the past few months I get so much more joy just being a facilitator. Like I don't even feel like setting up my my instrument.
Yes.
I just want to be on this side,
Right.
and maybe that's why I decided to do these conversations, like just craving to hear these stories, and it inspires me, like last week after I finished with Steve Cole's interview, and I just told my wife, I know it's lunchtime, but I just want to put on his album and
Right.
just play along.
Right.
It just it's just so inspiring. And yeah, and I just love being, just this middleman, to try to, bring your stories and your music to whoever's listening, so that's bringing me a lot of joy. So thank
Great.
you, Xavier. I really appreciate it. And of course, Andy is beyond amazing, and on the playing side, that's a given, but I think there's just so much that we can learn from you, by hearing your stories and answering questions, which is really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Roxy, yes, Roxy, next week we have both Dave Koss and Tom Politzer, so that will be really fun. I just so amazed, and every single guest is so different. I don't think there have been two conversations that have gone the same way, so it's always
Yeah.
such a blessing.
It's
So thanks.
people have the different ways into this thing, right? Different
Yeah,
motivations and different stories and different gigs they had and random lucky things that went their way, all that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
it's going to be very specific and unique in every case, which is cool. Makes it interesting. So
It's so crazy. And maybe, I know it's deviating a bit, but I have to share this crazy story, after what you said, Andy. And I was listening to Russell Wong and Greg Fillingane's conversation as well. And you guys can find it on YouTube. And it was so inspiring because Greg shared that he got his Stevie Wonder gig because he was good friends with a drummer named Ricky Lawson. And
sure.
Ricky got the interview at the audition. So he was gonna fly to New York, and they were together packing. And Ricky was so nice. He told Greg, "Hey, why don't you just pass me a cassette with you playing, and I'll pass it to Stevie Wonder." As a friend, I mean, he's busy packing and has so many things to think about. To think for his friend Greg, that was just amazing. So Ricky went for the audition, and Ricky actually didn't get the part. So he left and very dejected. And as he was walking out of the studio, he already left the building. And then suddenly he reached in his pocket and he was like, "Oh, I still have the cassette. I forgot to pass it to Stevie Wonder." So for most people, you flew there and you didn't get the gig and dejected, you're not gonna walk back in.
Right.
But he was like, probably he promised his friend Greg. So he went back in, he passed to I think one of the managers, and the managers put it on the table. Stevie wasn't there. And then Stevie got back, and the first tape, and there's tons of tapes there. The first tape he put on, it was Greg's cassette. And he straight away asked his manager, "Who's this?" And the manager said, "Oh, this guy called Greg," and then they butchered his last name. But Stevie was like, "Oh, he had to ask because Stevie couldn't tell whether it was him playing or Greg playing."
Wow.
That was how good his playing was. And then, in Greg's words, he said that he heard the story was that Stevie just said, "Get him,"
Right.
and then Greg got a call. And in
Right.
the end, he was in his band before
Right.
even his 19th birthday. So
Unbelievable.
it's just these things when I hear it, I'm just like, and it is all aligned, because I've been following the career of someone like Ricky Lawson for a long time or so, and everything makes sense. You know,
Right.
the type of person he was, this story makes perfect sense. Not many people would do that for a friend,
No. No. No.
and
Definitely
man,
not.
when I just and that was the many blessings that I got from watching that YouTube interview. So yeah, I just hope that whoever is listening now, you're just taking back these nuggets, and even if there was just one good nugget
Sure.
from this conversation, and that will make it all worth it. So really,
Well,
really
I
thankful.
mean that story and my story. I think really the essence of it is you do your very best, right, in your practice in your professionalism every day. Do not give up, right? And uh, if you have all that honorable stuff lined up, one way or another, sooner or later, right, something will come into your view. It may not be the thing that you thought you wanted, right? It
Mm,
may not be the thing that you were hunting for, but
mm,
something will come. If you're living that work ethic and dedication every single day of your life, it's inevitable. So
mm. Yeah, man. It's really something that we need to constantly remind ourselves. And and I guess it just shows, that, there's a lot of faith in humanity, just that they're amazing people. And, seeing just how, you guys in the US, the community of amazing saxophonists, how everyone is, just on great terms and, great
yeah,
friends with each other, that really speaks volumes as well.
yeah, it's. I mean, when as you're mentioning that, like I literally wish I saw those guys more, right? I really because normal. I mean, typically, uh, if you're on a gig, like other saxophone players aren't, and and there's a jazz festival in Pennsylvania each year where I for whatever reason I get to see a lot of those guys, right? I see Gerald, I see Kirk, I see Everett, um, and see Jeff, Steve, and different people every year. But
Mm,
I look forward to that. Like literally, I look forward to that jazz festival because I know that I'm going to see those guys and we're going to hang out and
mm,
play some and also just hang out in the bar and uh, talk about a thing that we're kind of in the club on, right? Like we're members of this association, right? So there's so
yeah.
much commonality with those people, right? Even if you don't really know them all that well in actuality, right?
Mm,
You've been through the same thing somehow. So
that's
anyway,
amazing. It's amazing. And we have MJ Con MD says I'm inspired, which is great. Thank you.
awesome.
And Kathy says thank you for the great interview. Thank you, Kathy, for
Thank
being
you,
here
Kathy.
the whole time. And Andy,
My
guess what?
sister.
Your sister. that's that's so amazing. And the funny thing is, maybe your sister hasn't even heard some of these stories. You
Probably
know.
maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not.
So
But
so cool that.
she likes that I mentioned our mom. So
Yeah, that's cool.
hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ben over here from Singapore, nice to see you. I know, Ben, you have to work, so if you are sneakily watching this video at work, thank you so much. So, yeah, Andy, I know it's getting late over there, and I don't want to
It
hold you up too much, but I
it's
have
past my
to.
bedtime, Daniel. That is for sure. So
Yeah, and I know you have a young daughter as well.
I
So, how has
do.
that been? I guess having a lot more family
Oh
time.
man, well that's I should have that's another thought. Like it's not related to music, but that's a silver lining, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm getting to be around. In this time period, I would have been gone all over the place, and this I don't remember the last time I had 3 months right at home without like leaving to get on an airplane once.
Yeah.
So can't go on forever, but it's a beautiful thing at the 3 month period. So
Yeah.
anyway, but
And I guess you get to transcribe a lot of Frozen
yeah,
and
sorry,
Disney
sorry.
tunes. So yeah, maybe that's the next
I don't
gig.
think I'm not going to cover a Frozen tune, but I can tell you that the fact that I know Adina Menzel, right, and that she was in my apartment once in Manhattan years ago.
Wow,
I'm cool in my daughter's eyes for probably like the next 5 years. So
that's so funny. Yeah, maybe Andy, I'll try to sneak in one more question from
yeah, sure.
Marcus from YouTube. He asked, "Can we discuss how important is it to you to use the piano? Do you play? How much do you play, and how does it help you in your composition?"
So I mean I think it's super essential to have a harmonic, a chordal instrument at your disposal, right? And sort of irrespective of how skilled you are, but be able to play some guitar, play some piano. It's absolutely essential. So I play piano. I'm like, I know about harmony. I know a lot about harmony. So that I'm not no chop monster, right? I'm not going to take a gig on piano, but I certainly can play, and it's a very important part of my compositional work. Absolutely. So, I mean, sometimes a thing will start with you messing around the piano and you find a harmonic sequence, like a four chord sequence that you think is kind of beautiful, and the tune could start right there, right? Or maybe the beat is first, but then that harmonic layer is the next thing. So, um, in fact, I would say it's extremely in my case, it's extremely rare that I write from the saxophone perspective, right? That I pick up the saxophone and play a melody, right, without thought about harmony or context, and say, oh, I really like that melody. Let me figure out how to incorporate everything else into its realm. It's for me that's rare. It's ordinarily like a harmonic sequence, and then that will like kick off lots of melodic ideas in my head, right? And um, very often, if I'm playing piano, like I'll have a melodic idea in my head, and when I eventually get to the saxophone, I immediately throw that melodic idea out, right? Because it was cool on the piano, but it's maybe instantaneously not cool on the saxophone. Then you write another melodic idea. But but I would argue like it's super important if you want to be a writer and you want to be involved in your own compositional process and not have to rely on others completely, to play guitar or piano and to have a knowledge of harmony to one extent or another. So
Mm. Cool. Thank you so much for
sure.
answering that. And since we're talking a bit about composition, when could we expect your new album?
Okay, so I'm basically done the 10 songs. Like I literally have like a trombone overdub left to do, on doubling a melody with me, and that might be it. And then some editing and file management stuff, right? Then I'll have 10 documents that are ready to mix. So the real thing is, like, for me, the mixing process is I sit with it's usually David Mann, right? And I send the stuff to him and he'll mix it. But the way it ends is we're in the room together for 3-4 hours per song, and I'll sit down at the desk and I'll tweak, right? And I'll mess with stuff and mess around, and then I'll get up and he'll sit down and he'll tweak, right? So I have to be able to do that. That it's a long answer to your question, but as soon
Oh.
as like we can be in the same space because the music is basically done, um,
Mm.
I'll mix the record in a week, right? And if that can happen in July, then it could very easily be out this fall. And if that can't happen until October, it'll probably be out in the spring. But I'm hoping that the former is the way that it's going to go. So
Mm.
uh,
Mm.
anyway, to get right to the point, like my plan is for the fall, and I'll tell you that there are 6 tunes on tenor, 2 tunes on soprano, and 2 tunes on alto, and
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to have. It's impossible to know until you're done. But to Xavier's point, will it have the magical cohesion of Traveler or not? I don't know. Maybe, but there's some pretty badass saxophone playing on there. I will say that, and cool grooves and production. So I I critique, but at the moment I'm liking this. I'm not hating it, which is a good sign.
Mm.
It's a good sign.
That's amazing. So if you guys do follow Andy on social media on both Facebook and Instagram and follow his music, check it out, contact him directly, if you want to get his signed CDs, and then that will be the best way for you to look out for his music. So thank you so much everyone for being here. Really,
Thanks, everybody.
really, yeah, really appreciate it. And for those who are watching in Asia, I'll be playing a show tonight with my wife on vocals, and we'll be
Awesome.
on the Safra Mount Faber Facebook page. So you do look out for that. And yeah, for those of you like Ben is saying, he'll catch the replay for the parts he missed out. Yeah, this video will be up on YouTube. You can share the link and subscribe if you haven't. And I'm gonna rewatch all these interviews because as much as I'm in the moment, but I do have to juggle many elements here to get this show working, So, I'm someone who needs to reread or rewatch things multiple times. So, I'm going to gather all the nuggets of wisdom again for myself. So, yeah, you guys can do the same. This video will be still on YouTube. So, thank you so much, Andy. I really, really appreciate your
My
time way
pleasure.
past your
My
bedtime,
pleasure. It's good
you
to see
know,
you, Daniel.
for
Good to see
sure.
you.
Yeah. And really thank you for all your sharing. And yeah, and hopefully this won't be the last conversation. Down the road we
Great.
can regroup for part two. I had so many things I wanted to touch on, but we can definitely keep that for another time. And yeah, thank you
Sounds
for all those of you who have been sending in questions and participating. That's important as well. We know you guys have burning questions for Andy, but if not anything, look for him on social media, and then you guys can carry on the conversation from there
absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for all of you who have stayed with us in the in the Eastern time zone. I know it's getting late, so but thank you so much, Andy, and then we'll see all of you guys again soon. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye bye.